He missed a $1 million deal
hurry!
to help a
They're closing
lost
the
boy,
gate!
then
I
discovered
know!
who his mother
I
was.
know!
Daniel had 30 seconds to reach the boarding gate. If he missed that flight, his company would lose its biggest contract. Then a little Korean boy grabbed his hand and whispered, "Please, help me find my mother." Daniel looked at the gate. Then he looked at the frightened child, and in that moment, he made a decision that would cost him everything he had worked for. Daniel ran through the crowded terminal of Busan International Airport with his laptop bag pressed against his side. His assistant, Mark, was running behind him. "Daniel, they're closing the gate!" Daniel didn't answer. His phone was still vibrating in his pocket. He already knew who was calling. The investor in Tokyo. The investor who had spent 3 months negotiating with him. The investor who had finally agreed to sign a contract worth nearly $4 million. That money would save Daniel's company. Without it, his employees could lose their jobs within weeks. The company could collapse. And Daniel knew it. He had spent 5 years building Bright Tech from almost nothing. He had started the company after moving from Nigeria to South Korea with a backpack, a second-hand laptop, and a belief that technology could connect African businesses with opportunities they couldn't reach before. But the dream had become painfully expensive. Office rent was overdue. 2 employees had already threatened to resign. His bank had rejected another loan. And now everything depended on one meeting in Tokyo. Daniel reached the departure area. The gate was still open. "Thank God," Mark gasped. Daniel looked at the boarding screen. Tokyo, final boarding. He stepped forward. Then he heard a small voice behind him. Sir?
I can't
Daniel
find
stopped.
my mommy.
He turned around. A little boy
What's
stood
your
several
name?
meters away. He looked about
Leo.
6 years old. His small
Where's
backpack
your
hung from one
mother?
shoulder, and one of his shoelaces was dragging across the floor. But what caught Daniel's attention wasn't the shoe. It was the boy's face. He looked terrified. Daniel glanced around. There was no adult with him. The boy looked at the crowd, then back at Daniel. "Sir, I can't find my mommy." Daniel froze. Mark grabbed his arm. "Daniel, we have to go." Daniel looked at the gate. A flight attendant was preparing to close it. Then he looked at the boy again. "What's your name?" Daniel asked. "Leo." "Where's your mother?" Leo pointed toward the crowded terminal. "I don't know." Daniel crouched. "Did you come here alone?" Leo shook his head quickly. "No. Mommy was here. I was holding her hand." His eyes filled with tears. "Then I couldn't see her anymore." Daniel stood up. He looked at the gate again. The final passengers were boarding. Mark's voice became desperate. "Daniel, please, we can call airport security. They'll take care of him." Later, Daniel knew Mark was right. He also knew what would happen if he stayed. The Tokyo investor would close the deal with someone else. Daniel's company would probably not survive. He had spent years waiting for this opportunity. One flight stood between him and the biggest contract of his life, but Leo was still standing there, alone, confused, afraid. Daniel slowly removed his laptop bag. "Go," he told Mark. Mark stared at him. "What?" "Take the flight." "Daniel,
Mr. Daniel,
tell them
are
I'll
you
call."
boarding?
"You're serious?"
No.
Daniel nodded.
Then
Mark
we've
looked
made our
toward the gate.
decision.
Then toward Leo. "You're going to miss a $4 million deal for a child you don't even know." Daniel swallowed. "I know." "Then come on." Daniel shook his head. "Go." Mark stared at him for another second before running toward the gate. Daniel watched him disappear. A few moments later, the gate closed. The airplane that was supposed to save his company was leaving without him. Daniel stood beside Leo. His phone rang. He answered. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was cold. "Mr. Daniel, the investors have been waiting."
A little.
"I know. Are you boarding?"
Don't be sorry.
Daniel looked at the frightened boy beside him. "No." Silence. Then the investor said, "Then I believe we've reached our decision." The call ended. Daniel slowly lowered the phone. His biggest deal was gone, and all he had gained was a frightened 6-year-old boy holding his hand. For several minutes, Daniel said nothing. Then Leo tugged at his shirt. "Sir?" "Yes?" "Are you angry?" Daniel looked down. "No." "Because you missed your plane?" Daniel forced a smile. "A little." Leo looked sad. "I'm sorry." Daniel crouched again. "Don't be." "Why?" Daniel looked toward the closed gate. "Because you needed help." Leo stared at him. Then, for the first time, the boy smiled. It was a tiny smile. But Daniel would remember it for the rest of his life. Airport security arrived several minutes later. They began asking Leo questions. His full name. His mother's name. Where they had been. Where he last saw her. But Leo was too frightened to explain everything clearly. Then he suddenly remembered something. My mommy has a blue phone. One security officer asked, Do you know her number? Leo shook his head. Do you know her name? Anna. Daniel frowned. Anna? Leo nodded. Mommy's name is Anna. The officers searched the airport system. Nothing. Daniel stayed beside Leo. He could have left. He had already lost the flight, but something inside him refused to abandon the boy. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Then 40. Daniel's phone rang again. This time it was his office manager. Daniel, the Tokyo group just emailed us. What did they say? They've signed with another company. Daniel closed his eyes. How bad? They're asking us to return the advance from the previous stage. Daniel said nothing. And Daniel? Yes? We may not be able to make payroll next month. The call ended. Daniel sat in silence. His company was collapsing. His biggest client was gone. His employees were in danger. And all because he had stopped for a child. For the first time, doubt entered his mind. Maybe he had made the wrong choice. Maybe kindness was a luxury poor people couldn't afford. Then Leo leaned against his shoulder. Daniel looked down at him, and he knew he would make the same choice again. Suddenly, a loud voice came from the entrance. Leo! The boy's head lifted. Mommy! A woman came running through the terminal. She wore a simple dark coat and carried no handbag. Her hair was slightly messy. Her face was pale with fear. The moment she saw Leo, she ran toward him. Leo rushed into her arms. The woman held him tightly. Where were you? I was looking for you. I was looking everywhere. She kissed his forehead repeatedly. Then she noticed Daniel. Her expression changed. You were with him? Leo nodded. He helped me. The woman slowly approached Daniel. Thank you. Daniel smiled. It's okay. No, she said. It isn't. She looked at Leo, then back at Daniel. What happened? Daniel explained. He told her that Leo had been alone near the boarding area. He explained that he had stayed until security arrived. The woman listened quietly. Then she asked, Did you miss your flight because of my son? Daniel hesitated. Yes. Her face tightened. I'm so sorry. It's fine. No, it isn't. She looked at him carefully. What was the flight? Tokyo. Business? Yes. What kind? Daniel almost laughed. The kind that doesn't happen again. She didn't smile. Instead, she asked, What do you do? Technology. What company? Bright Tech. The woman's eyes changed. Daniel noticed. You know it? She didn't answer immediately. Then she asked, Are you Daniel? Yes. Daniel Okafor? He nodded. The woman stared at him. I've heard your name. Daniel was confused. From where? Before she could answer, her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Her expression became serious. I'm sorry. I have to take this. She stepped away. Daniel looked at Leo. The boy was watching him. Thank you, Leo said. Daniel smiled. Take care of your mother. Leo laughed. Then Daniel picked up his bag and walked away. He had no idea that the woman behind him was about to change his life. Her name was Grace. But Daniel didn't know who Grace really was. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the Bright Tech office. The atmosphere was completely different. Nobody was talking. His employees were sitting quietly around their desks. The company had been struggling for months, but now everyone knew the Tokyo contract was gone. Daniel walked into his office. Mark was waiting. You shouldn't have come. Daniel dropped his bag. I own the company. Exactly. Daniel looked at him. Mark sighed. The Tokyo investors aren't the only problem. What now? We've received another notice. Daniel took the document. His eyes moved across the page. The landlord was demanding payment. If we don't pay within 10 days, we're out. Daniel sat down. He looked around the small office. He remembered when he had first opened it. There had been only 2 desks. Now there were 12 employees. People had trusted him. People had left secure jobs to join him. He couldn't let them down. But he had almost nothing left. Then Mark said something that made Daniel look up. Someone asked about you. Who? A woman. What woman? She didn't give much information. What did she say? She said her name was Grace. Daniel froze. The woman from the airport? Mark nodded. She wants to meet you. Daniel leaned back. Why? I don't know. Did she say what she wants? Mark shook his head. Then he handed Daniel a card. Daniel looked at it. There was only a name and a phone number. Grace Park. Nothing else, Daniel called. A woman answered immediately. Daniel. Yes. This is Grace. I know. I'd like to meet you. About Leo? Yes, and something else. Daniel hesitated. What something else? I'd rather explain in person. They agreed to meet that afternoon. Daniel arrived at a quiet restaurant near the river. Grace was already there. She stood when he approached. Thank you for coming. Daniel sat down. She looked different from the airport. Her hair was neatly styled. Her clothes were elegant but simple. There was something calm and powerful about her. Daniel didn't know why. I wanted to thank you properly, she said. You already did. I don't think I did. She paused. You missed an important flight because of my son. Daniel smiled. I've heard that already. Grace didn't smile. I asked someone to look into your company. Daniel's expression changed. Why? Because I wanted to understand who you were. Daniel leaned back. And what did you find? That your company is in trouble. He looked away. I can handle it. Can you? Daniel didn't answer. Grace continued. You have good technology. Daniel looked at her. But? Your problem isn't your technology. What is it? You don't know how to protect yourself. Daniel frowned. What does that mean? You've turned down investors because they wanted too much control. Daniel said nothing. You've refused contracts that required you to sell customer information. He looked surprised. You know about that? I know enough. She leaned forward. Do you know how many founders would have accepted those deals? Daniel sighed. Probably most. And you didn't. I started Bright Tech for a reason. What reason? To make technology affordable for businesses that couldn't normally afford it. Grace nodded. That's what I thought. Daniel studied her. Why are you asking all this? Grace reached into her bag. She placed a folder on the table. Daniel opened it. Inside were financial reports. His company's financial reports. But there was something else. A proposed investment. Daniel looked at the number, then looked at Grace. This is... Yes. Who do you represent? Grace smiled. My own investment company. Daniel stared at her. What investment company? She handed him another card. Daniel looked down. His eyes widened. Grace Park CEO, East Star Capital. Daniel had heard of East Star Capital. Almost every technology founder in South Korea had. It was one of the largest private investment firms in the country. Daniel looked at Grace again. You're the CEO? Yes. He laughed softly. You're Leo's mother. Yes. And you came to my office to invest in my company? Grace nodded. Not exactly. Daniel frowned. Then what? I came to see whether the man who helped my son was really the man I thought he was. Daniel closed the folder. And? Grace smiled. I haven't decided yet. Daniel almost laughed. You haven't decided? No. You already know everything about my company. Knowing your company isn't the same as knowing you. Daniel looked at her. What do you need to know? Grace's answer was simple. Whether you would make the same decision again. Daniel didn't hesitate. Yes. Grace smiled. Good. She pushed the folder toward him. Then let's talk. The investment was smaller than Daniel expected. Grace didn't demand control. She didn't ask for his company. She offered enough money to keep Bright Tech alive, along with access to East Star's network. Daniel signed. For the first time in months, he could breathe. But Grace had one condition. Don't become a different person because the company starts making money. Daniel smiled. I won't. I hope not. Over the next few months, everything changed. Bright Tech hired new employees. Its technology reached companies across South Korea. Then Grace opened a door Daniel had never imagined. She introduced Bright Tech to businesses in Africa. Within months, the company began expanding into Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa. Daniel couldn't believe it. The same company that had nearly closed its doors was suddenly receiving offers from major clients. His employees stopped worrying about layoffs. The office became busier. Daniel finally started sleeping again. But something else was changing. His relationship with Grace. At first, they only talked about business. Then they began talking about family. Then life. Then their fears. Grace had built her company after losing her husband several years earlier. She had raised Leo while running one of the country's biggest investment firms. Daniel respected her strength. But he also saw the exhaustion behind it. Grace didn't trust people easily. Daniel understood why. One evening, Daniel visited Grace's home to discuss a new project. Leo ran toward him. "Uncle Daniel?" Daniel laughed. "Why are you calling me uncle?" "Because Mommy said you're important." Grace appeared behind him. "I did not say that." Leo grinned. "Yes, you did." Daniel laughed. Grace shook her head. "Don't listen to him." Leo grabbed Daniel's hand. "Come, I want to show you something." He pulled Daniel upstairs. Grace watched them. For the first time in years, her home felt different. It felt alive. Later that evening, Daniel and Grace sat outside. Leo had fallen asleep. Grace looked at Daniel. "You're good with him." Daniel smiled. "He makes it easy." Grace was quiet. Then she said, "He hasn't trusted anyone like this in a long time." Daniel looked at her. "I don't want to replace anyone." "You're not." Their eyes met. Neither said anything, but both understood what was happening. Their relationship was becoming something neither had planned. Then everything changed. One morning, Daniel received an urgent call. "Daniel, we have a problem." "What happened?" "Our software source code has been stolen." Daniel stood immediately. "What?" "Someone accessed the private server." "Who?" "We don't know." Within hours, the news spread. A rival technology company had released a product almost identical to Brighttech's. The timing was suspicious. Then Brighttech was accused of stealing the technology. Daniel couldn't believe it. "This is impossible." But the evidence seemed convincing. Confidential documents had been copied. Internal files had been accessed. And someone had leaked them to the media. The company began losing clients. Investors became nervous. East Star's board demanded answers from Grace. One board member told her, "You invested millions in him." Grace replied, "And I stand by him." "What if he's responsible?" "He isn't." "How do you know?" Grace looked at him. "Because I know the man." But even Grace couldn't explain the evidence. Daniel began investigating. He checked access records. Employee computers. Server activity. Everything. Then he noticed something strange. The stolen files had been accessed 3 weeks before Grace invested in Brighttech. Daniel stared at the screen. 3 weeks. That meant the attack had started before eStar entered the company. Someone had been watching Brighttech long before Grace arrived. Daniel kept digging. Then he found the name of the company behind the rival product. K1 Systems. The same company that had won the Tokyo contract. Daniel's heart stopped. The company that had taken his deal was now selling technology almost identical to his. He called Grace. "I know who did it." Grace arrived within an hour. Daniel showed her the evidence. She stared at the screen. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "How?" "The timing." He explained everything. But there was another problem. K1 had connections with one of Brighttech's former contractors, a man who had left the company 6 months earlier. His name was Peter. Daniel remembered Peter. He had once asked for access to Brighttech's entire system. Daniel had refused. Now Peter was working for K1. Everything suddenly made sense. Peter had been stealing information. K1 had been preparing to copy Brighttech's technology, and the Tokyo deal had been part of a larger plan. Daniel realized something else. If he had caught the flight that day, he would have signed the contract. The contract would have given K1 access to Brighttech's technology and customer network. By missing the flight, Daniel had accidentally avoided the trap. Grace stared at him. "You didn't lose the Tokyo deal." Daniel looked at her. "You escaped it." The realization hit him hard. The thing he had spent months believing was his greatest failure had actually protected his company. But the story wasn't over. K1 attacked publicly. They accused Bright Tech of fraud. Daniel was forced to defend the company in front of the media. Reporters surrounded him. One asked, "Mr. Daniel, did you steal the technology?" "No." "Then why does the evidence say otherwise?" "Because someone created the evidence." Another reporter shouted, "Are you accusing K1 Systems?" Daniel looked directly into the cameras. "Yes." Grace stood beside him. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She trusted him. The investigation continued. Then Peter broke. He admitted everything. K1 had paid him to steal Bright Tech's code. They had planned to destroy Bright Tech before the company could expand. The evidence was released. The accusations disappeared. K1's reputation collapsed. Bright Tech survived. But Daniel wasn't finished. His company had grown quickly. Investors were now offering him huge amounts of money. One offer was worth more than $20 million. The deal would make Daniel rich. But there was one condition. He would have to abandon Bright Tech's original mission. The company would focus only on wealthy markets. African customers would be removed from the platform. Daniel read the contract. Then closed it. Grace was sitting across from him. "You're going to reject it?" "Yes." "It's $20 million. I know. You could become extremely wealthy." Daniel smiled. "I didn't build Bright Tech to become wealthy." Grace looked at him. "Then why?" Daniel thought about the beginning. The tiny office. The second-hand laptop. The people who had believed in him. The goal was always to give smaller businesses access to tools that powerful companies take for granted. Grace smiled. "Then don't change." Daniel looked at her. "I won't." Months later, Bright Tech announced a major expansion. The company would build a technology bridge between South Korea and Africa. Hundreds of jobs would be created. Small businesses would gain access to affordable software. And Bright Tech was no longer a struggling startup. It had become one of the fastest-growing technology companies connecting the two markets. At a major business conference in Seoul, Daniel stood on stage beside Grace. Hundreds of people watched. Cameras flashed. A reporter asked Grace the question everyone wanted answered. "Why did you invest in Daniel?" Grace looked at Daniel. Then she looked at the audience. "I didn't invest in his company first." The room became quiet. "I invested in the person." Daniel smiled. Grace continued. "I met him when he had every reason to walk away from my son." She paused. "He didn't know who I was." Another pause. "He didn't know I could help him." Her voice softened. "He simply saw a frightened child." The audience was silent. And he stayed. Applause filled the room. Daniel looked toward the front row. Leo was sitting beside an East Star employee. The little boy was smiling. After the ceremony, Daniel walked backstage. Leo ran toward him. "Uncle Daniel." Daniel picked him up. "You're getting heavy." Leo laughed. Then he looked down. His shoelace was undone. Daniel stared at it. "You did that on purpose." Leo smiled innocently. "No." Daniel laughed. He crouched down. "Come here." He tied the shoelace carefully. Leo looked at him. "Why did you help me that day?" Daniel paused. He remembered the airport, the boarding gate, the phone call, the lost contract, the fear, the doubt. Then he smiled. "Because you needed someone." Leo hugged him. Grace stood nearby. Daniel looked at her. She smiled. For a moment, none of them spoke. There was no contract between them. No business deal. No investment proposal. Just something much more valuable. Trust. A few weeks later, Daniel returned to the same airport. He stood near the departure gate, where everything had changed. The same kind of announcements echoed through the terminal. Passengers hurried past him. Daniel looked at the gate. Years ago, he had believed that missing his flight had destroyed his future. Now he understood. That flight had never been his future. It had only been a door. And sometimes, the door you desperately try to reach is not the door you were meant to walk through. Daniel had chased money. He had chased contracts. He had chased success. But the most important opportunity of his life had appeared when he wasn't looking for one. It had arrived as a frightened little boy, with an untied shoelace. And because Daniel stopped to help him, he lost a business deal. He lost money. He lost sleep. He lost the future he thought he wanted. But he gained something he never expected. A second chance. A family. A trusted partner. and a company that finally became what he had dreamed it could be. The lesson was simple. Kindness doesn't always reward you immediately. Sometimes it costs you. Sometimes it makes you look foolish. Sometimes it forces you to walk away from the opportunity everyone else tells you to chase. But one small act of kindness can open a door you didn't even know existed. Daniel thought he had missed the flight that would change his life. He was wrong. The moment that changed his life happened when he stopped running and helped a little boy tie his shoe.